Hello! Alright, for our next project, we are going to be creating a color wheel out of one of your photos using, again, you guessed it, adjustment layers and also a new way of selecting things. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing you're going to need to do is you need to find yourself a photograph. This can be any of the photos you've taken. The ideal candidate is going to have the subject be in an area that you could crop it into a small triangle. If it has bolder colors, that's going to also be much better for you. So here I've chosen a photo of one of my friends on Halloween dressed up as a unicorn. So you can see the original looks something like this. Okay, so what we're going to do to start out, after we have our photo selected that we know we want, is we're going to actually, instead of opening it in Photoshop, we're going to just create a new document. So I'm going to go File, New. And in here, we're actually going to set this to inches, and we'll create this new document as 7 by 7 inches with a resolution of 300 pixels per inch. Make sure it's in RGB color mode. And then the background contents, this really depends on what your photograph looks like. My photo has a dark background, like it's at nighttime, it's dark, so I'm going to switch my background to be black, just so it kind of blends in better. But you can choose whatever you want. If it doesn't totally match your background, that is also fine. Okay, so after we get this set up, we're going to go ahead and hit Create, which is going to make this plain square background for us. Alright, first thing we need to do is we need to set up some kind of grid that's going to help us crop our photo so that we can fit exactly, I think we have 12 of them in there. So at the top and the side of my screen, you'll notice that we have these rulers. And the rulers, if you don't have them, you can just push Command R on your keyboard and they'll come or go away. These are just helpful in creating guides. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click down on the ruler and then drag it out, and you can see that a little guide comes along with my mouse. I'm going to drag this until it's in the center of my square, my canvas here, which will be at 3.5 inches because it is 7 inches wide. And we'll do the same thing the other way. Okay, now after I have this centered, just as a guide, what we're going to do is we're going to grab the pen tool. It's right here. If you hit P on your keyboard, that's going to give you the shortcut for it, and we want the pen tool. The pen tool, if you've used Illustrator before, is a great little tool, but in Photoshop it works a little bit differently. Because we can create either a shape or a path, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the term. So up here in the options bar, you want to make sure that for what we're about to do, we need to be drawing a shape. It can't be a path or this isn't going to work. So make sure you check shape right here. And then I'm going to change, don't have a fill on it, but give it a stroke color. I'm going to change mine from black to be white so that I can actually see it on top of my black background. It doesn't really matter what color it is, but I'm going to just choose white. Okay. Now that I have this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the pen tool. You just click where you want it to start and then you click where you want it to stop. You just put down 2 dots and it draws a line between them. So I'm going to click once up here at the top, I'm going to move down here, and I'm going to hold down Shift on my keyboard just to make sure that my line is extra straight. And I'll click down here at the bottom, and that drew myself a nice line. So if I go back to my just Move tool, so that I'm not connected to the pen tool anymore. And then to hide this guide so I can just see what my line actually looks like, on my keyboard I'm going to push Command colon, the colon being, it's the little key just to the right of the letter L. So Command colon is going to hide your guides for you. If you push it again, it puts them back. So I'm going to hide my guides because I don't need them right now. And you'll notice that I have a line here, and when I drew it, it actually added that shape onto its own layer. If we had been on a path, it would not have done that. So we need it to be on its own layer. That's very important. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use this line now as a guide to create all of our different triangles in kind of a color wheel shape. So first thing is I'm going to make a copy of this Shape 1 layer by just dragging it down and dropping it on the Post-it note button. After I have that copy, Shape 1 copy, I'm going to transform and rotate this line. There's several ways you can do this. First way is if you go up to the edit menu and then down to transform and then down to rotate, it will allow you to turn it, and then up here in your options bar, there's a little choice right here that has a little, I don't know, compass on it and then some degrees. So in here is where we're going to type in how much we want it to rotate. We're going to put in 30, and you'll notice that that rotates that line 30 degrees. And then when I hit enter, it's going to enter the number in, and then I have to hit enter again to set the transformation. And you'll notice that now my line is just rotated 30 degrees. And it doesn't go all the way to the edge, which is actually not a problem for us for this because it's just a guide. So we'll just do this again and again until we have it rotated. We have kind of a guide going all the way around. The other way that you can rotate this is to push Command T on your keyboard. And then also come up here and just do 30 degrees. Once I get to this point, I'm going to just grab all three of them, make a copy of all three of them, and then rotate those three 90 degrees. And that flips it, so now I have all of my lines drawn in that I need. Okay. So we've got all of our little triangles here, and what we need to do next is we need to get our photo in here, and then we need to create a mask so that our photo fits into this triangle. So first, the photo. We are going to go File, Place Embedded, and then I'm going to go and locate where I have my photo saved, which is in my photography folder. It's probably best if you can add in a JPEG, though this will work with a RAW file. Just will be a bigger file at the end, so I'm using a JPEG. Okay, so I've got this JPEG put in here, and I'm going to choose kind of my first little triangle, and I'm going to rotate this photo, I'm going to resize it, whatever I need to do to kind of get it in the right spot. And I want this photo to be so that I can see kind of his face in between these triangles because we're going to crop it. You'll notice the edge kind of comes off, which is okay. Alright, once I have it sort of placed where I want, you'll notice it still has this X across it. That means because it's in transform mode, so I just hit enter and it goes away. If I ever want to enter that transform mode again so I can rotate it again or resize it, I just hit Command T on my keyboard, and that will allow me again to kind of make any changes before hitting enter again. Okay, I'm just going to move this underneath my lines to check that that's about where I want it. I would say we're capturing most of the gloriousness of this photo, so that's probably going to be pretty good. Okay, so I've got my photo right here on this layer, and what we're going to do is we're going to actually use the lasso, the polygonal lasso tool, say that 10 times fast, and we're going to select this triangle shape, and then we're going to create a mask on this photo layer. So I'm going to grab this polygonal lasso tool. There's several lasso tools. You don't want the normal lasso, we want polygonal lasso. So hold down on it and grab that one. And I'm going to just start here. This works sort of like the pen tool. You click on the corner. So I click once, and then I'm going to come down here to the center. I'm going to click once. I'm going to kind of follow this line, and I'm going to just try and line up my line exactly on it and then move outside of it. Click once. And then when I come back and click on my starting position again, you'll notice that this gives me the dancing ants, which means we have made a selection, which is good. Alright, and if your dancing ants aren't good, just hit Command D and do it again. Alright, we've got this. I made sure that I am on the layer of the photograph, and I'm going to come down here and hit my mask button, which will cut the photo, and it will just hide the bits that are outside of my guidelines. Okay, now that I have this, I'm going to do kind of the same thing with this photograph that I just did with those lines. So I'm going to make a copy of it. I'm going to enter it into transform mode by hitting Command T. And then you'll notice, though, there's a rotate point right here in the center of my photo. I can rotate it this way, but then what will happen is it will just turn the whole thing kind of like this, and then I have to grab it with my mouse and place it into the triangle. If instead of just leaving this little rotation point in the center, you can grab it and move it down to this central point of all the lines. If you put it there and then add the rotation of 30 degrees, you'll notice that it rotates around that point and it kind of lines it up perfectly with me, so I don't have to make any other adjustments. I'm going to hit enter twice and then do it again. So go ahead and rotate your images all the way around your circle. Okay, so you'll notice that over here in my layers panel, I have copied my photo the 12 times it is necessary and rotated it every time, so now I've got this wonderful little photo. You'll also notice that I still have these shape lines here kind of as my guides, and I no longer need these shapes, so I'm going to just select them and throw them in the trash can because they're just taking up space in the layers panel. Okay, so now I've got a background, which is just there, and then all of my shapes just kind of rotated around, and each one of them has a mask on it in the shape of the triangle that we created. Okay, so our next step is that we need to create some adjustment layers in order to change the colors of these images. The trick with this, however, is that we only want to create the adjustment layer over our little pizza slice of a photo. We don't want to put an adjustment layer over everything because the way that adjustment layers work is that they influence everything in the layers panel that's beneath them. So for example, if I come down here and I add in an adjustment layer, and just this is for watching, you don't have to do this part. So if I add in a hue saturation adjustment layer and I'm going to colorize this and I add some crazy color, and so you can see that this one has changed color. That's because in this layers panel, this adjustment layer is only above one photograph. You can see that this is the one that's underneath it. If I came up here to the top, however, and I added an adjustment layer of color, it suddenly changes everything because everything in my list is underneath that. So what we need to do is we're going to create our adjustment layers, but we want them to have a mask so that it matches up with each of these triangles perfectly, and it's not going to influence the ones we don't want it to influence. So the first thing we need to do is we need to choose which layer we're going to start with, and I'm going to just start with this one on the bottom. And you'll notice if we look at it, it's got a mask on it. So you have the photo, which is actually a smart object. We've got the mask, and you can see right here where it's kind of cutting the photo. This white area is what we want. Now, what's kind of cool about Photoshop is that if you ever want to reselect a selection we made earlier, because earlier we went with our lasso tool and we drew this triangle, instead of having to do that again, we can just hold down the Command key and click on our mask layer, not on the regular layer, on the mask, and it will give us the selection back again. It will select everything that is on that layer in the shape of the layer. So now I have that selection back that fits my image perfectly, my mask. So now I have made my selection. I held down Command, clicked on the mask layer, and I'm now selected on this layer. I'm going to add an adjustment layer by clicking on this little half white, half black circle. I'm going to choose hue saturation, which is going to change the color of it. So this does two things. First, it adds in the hue saturation layer right above my other one right there, and you'll notice that their masks look the same because this one is going to influence this, but only in this area, which is what we want. And then also it pops open our properties menu up here, which in the properties we've got some different options for what's going to happen with the color. The first thing we're going to do here is we're going to check this colorize button, and that immediately makes it so that it's changing colors, right? It goes to be a flat color. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to turn up the saturation so that it's higher. We can actually see kind of what's going on. I like to put mine in the 70s, so between 70 and 75 maybe. And then on this hue slider, this is where you can drag it around and change like what the actual hue of your color is. So we're going to start with red, and we're going to move our way around the color wheel that we learned about the other day in class. showing our primary colors, our secondary colors, and the tertiary colors. So your pattern, if you remember, should be primary, tertiary, secondary, tertiary, primary, tertiary, secondary, tertiary. So our first primary color is red. And I'm going to just make sure that this is a nice solid red for us. And we're pretty good. So then I'm going to just do the exact same thing to all of our other layers. I'm going to hold Command, click on the mask of the next one, select that layer so that it is highlighted, go down to my adjustment layers, add in a hue saturation adjustment, check the colorize button, and then do my next color. So we've got red, and then we're going to have red-orange for our next color. So I'm going to move this little slider till I feel like I've got a red-orange, which looks good. And then I move on to the next one. So you've got red, red-orange, orange, yellow-orange, yellow, yellow-green, green, blue-green, blue, blue-violet, violet, red-violet, back to red. So go ahead and go through and make an adjustment layer in the shape of the mask for every single one of these layers. And when you're done, each of your photo layers should have an adjustment layer that has an identical mask on it right above it. Alright, so you can see that I have gone through and added on an adjustment layer to every layer of my color wheel here, and now that I'm finished. So you can change the color of your background if you'd like. If you didn't do that at the beginning, just go on your background layer, and then you can use the paint bucket tool, which is over on the side, and it's underneath the gradient tool. So if you find the gradient, hold on it, it will give you the paint bucket. If you want to change the color of this to kind of fit your background better, that's cool. If it doesn't fit, like my background, you know, you can see the shape of my edge of my photo. That's okay. If you leave it with that little star pattern, that's fine too. So choose yourself a background color. Let's save this as a Photoshop and then save it as a JPEG. Turn the JPEG in on Schoology.